Hey everyone, welcome back to Brazil Crypto Report, a podcast produced by Activo Media and Advisory. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Paulo David, who's CEO of AmFi, one of Brazil's leading asset tokenization platforms. Before we dive into that, I want to give a quick shout out to our show sponsor, Avenia, which is building seamless infrastructure for cross-border payments in the Americas. We'll be hearing about them a bit later in the show. I'm really excited to introduce Paulo. Paulo, thanks so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure, Aaron, and it's amazing to be here in the show. I've heard so many histories that you tell here, so it's great to be on the show.
Amazing. Appreciate the kind words, and great to have you here. So Paulo, you have a super interesting entrepreneurial history that I would love to dive into a little bit. Would be really great if you could give us just kind of the background on AmFi and then also yourself.
Great. I'm a third-time entrepreneur. I've been in the fintech space since like day one. I built the first and the largest peer-to-peer lending platform in Brazil that was sold in 2017. And then I built Grafeno, one of the largest B2B fintechs in the country that process more than $8 billion per year. We're serving more than 15,000 companies that was sold in the beginning of this year in one of the major exits in the fintech industry in the country. And now I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of AmFi, the leading RWA platform in Brazil. And we aim to export our biggest commodity of our country, Brazilian interest rate. So that's the goal and that's the mission that we are 100% focused on.
I love that. It's funny. The first time we met, you actually mentioned that line about how the Brazil's interest rate is its most attractive export. And I'll confess I've sort of expropriated that line and I've used that in other contexts without giving you full credit for it. But it's very true. But I was hoping you could maybe just tell us a bit about what do you mean by that? Like to somebody who's maybe not from Brazil, like what are you talking about?
Okay, it's a very honest and you can use my lines, Aaron. You are you're an amazing person. We as entrepreneurs, we all use so much because you are helping us to educate the market. So you can use my lines as much as you want. But Brazil has one of the highest interest rates in the world. I think nowadays is the second highest interest rate in the world. And on the other hand, we have one of the most digitalized financial systems in the world, where our capital market, mainly our capital market, is not connected to the global ecosystem. So you see like the foreign investors buying our soya, buying our soybeans, buying iron, investing in venture capital. They are investing in equities in our exchange, but they are not buying private credit in Brazil because it's complex, bureaucratic, full of intermediaries, like lots of problems, lack of transparency. There is no secondary on top of that. So you see that we are one of the biggest producers of interest rates in the world, but it doesn't access the global capital market. So our goal here is to create a platform like a playing field that makes this market more transparent, easier to enter, more automated, create like a secondary market on top of that. So standardize the product so the global investors, they can understand what we are doing here. And once they see it and they see it with the full transparency that it needs to be in the market, they can understand the risks and understand that there is an immense opportunity to be explored in Brazil. But as long as it's secure, with control, with standardized process. And that's a little bit what we are doing here. And that's a little bit why we think this is what the biggest opportunity in the fintech space in Brazil right now to be explored.
Maybe talk a bit about what's the origin story for AmFi and how did you land on this concept precisely as, where you wanted to build your next startup? Figment is the leading independent provider of institutional staking infrastructure, with over $18 billion in assets under stake and more than 1,000 clients across Latin America and globally. Banks, exchanges, fintechs, and asset managers can earn secure and compliant rewards on proof-of-stake networks using Figment's non-custodial infrastructure. They offer everything institutions need to stake with confidence: point-and-click staking, real-time portfolio tracking, powerful APIs, audited infrastructure, and industry-leading slashing protection. Head over to figment.io to learn more. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about our show sponsor, Avenia. If you're building a wallet, a crypto consumer app, or a global payment platform, Avenia is your bridge to Latin America. You can instantly connect to PIX, SPAY, and CBU using stablecoins with a single API. No banks, no FX desks, no SWIFT. Head over to avenia.io to learn about how you can move money globally with full compliance and real-time settlement. Now back to the show. On this concept precisely as, where you wanted to build your next startup.
When we were building Grafeno, and just like a quick intro about what we were building there, Grafeno, as I said, a process around $8 billion, $80 billion per year in its platform, and almost 40% of the assets that reaches capital market in Brazil, they go through one of the solutions that we build in Grafeno. So we knew super well the players in this industry, we knew super well the pains of this industry, and also we knew super well how the assets and the flows, the cash flows, they operate in Brazilian market. So we saw that, okay, capital market, when we started Grafeno, was around roughly like $20 billion. Nowadays, it's $150 billion, so it's increasing and growing almost 40% each year. And nobody has a doubt that it will reach $500 billion over the next couple months, couple years. So it's growing. There is this need for our capital market to grow in order to provide funds for the Brazilian economy to grow. So when we saw all of that, we saw that, okay, there was no technology almost involved here in our capital market. Secondly, as I said, we saw many problems on terms of lack of transparency, accessibility, how you can automate stuff, how you can create a secondary, and how you can create a better infrastructure for this private credit market to happen in Brazil. And third, Aaron, we saw that the central bank is not only observing this industry, but actively pushing an agenda in order to create a better playing field for our capital market to grow. And they would choose the blockchain technology because of many reasons, but the technology plays a role here in Brazil. We don't have, as we were discussing before the podcast, okay, maybe in developed countries, the technology is incrementally bringing some innovations. Here in Brazil, we see that the technology is solving really deep infrastructural problems that we have in the country. So when we combined all those things with our dream to export Brazilian interest rate, there was this huge call that, okay, now is the moment for us to go for this market and go for this opportunity, because we really think Brazil is ready to be the leading country using new technology like blockchain technology, maybe AI technology, for capital market to grow and the private market to happen in a better playing field. So that's a little bit why we decided to focus 100% of our lives in this amazing journey. And we really think that now it's an amazing moment to be developing everything that we are doing here in the company.
Yeah, it seems like there really was kind of a perfect storm here in Brazil over these last couple of years. You have the central bank that's been promoting this. You have, Roberto Campos Neto, the president of the central bank, was talking about how, he wants to move Brazil's capital markets on chain, et cetera, which sounds like very lofty goals, but it's like, well, this is the president of a G20 central bank talking about this. It's not just some thought leader at a crypto conference, right? It's pretty big difference there. And yeah, maybe talk a bit about just what's the traction been. I mean, you guys started in 2022, and you've been going for about 3 years now, and now you've got something like 1.7 billion reais of tokenized assets that have been issued on the platform, which would be roughly, if I'm doing the conversion right, $350 million or so. So pretty good traction. But maybe just talk a bit about what have those early years been like? What's it been? What's that? Talk about the traction you're seeing, and what has this whole process been like?
Amazing, Aaron. When we started in 2022, I was knocking everybody's door in the institutional side, also in the regulator side. They were all saying Paulo, You are the 15th guy that comes here talking about blockchain. You are the first one that we understand that you are one of the most respected and with some nice achievements in your entrepreneurial career. So let's listen a little bit more because we don't understand, like we don't have a clue on how smart contracts and the blockchain technology will solve our plans here. So on the regulator side, we were selected to join LIFT, like the biggest sandbox that we have in Brazil by the central bank. And whenever Roberto Campos was talking about the benefits of how smart contracts can solve main like infrastructural problems that we have in capital market, he was discussing one of the case that we showed to the central bank. This was so great that Brazil was hosting the BIS, like the central bank of the central banks, discussion on how smart contracts can improve the efficiency in capital markets that we were presenting to them. And last week, in the second week of October, I was invited to join the DC FinTech Week in Washington in behalf of the BIS and the World Bank and invitation to explain to them how Brazil is evolving on this technology. And they got amazed, like, guys, come on, $350 million under management? Like, using the blockchain, like, come on, we are discussing like theoretical stuff here in the US, and you guys are developing like real shit, building like the technology, showing how we can reduce costs like 38.5% in order to access the market. Oh, this is amazing. So I think for the regulator side, we went on that path. And on the CVM, our SEC here in Brazil, we were the first company authorized to do public offerings in Brazil using like our technology. And so the receivable tokens in Brazil, it's a reality. We don't have like a sandbox. We don't have like some authorization. It's a full license in order to reach retail investors, in order to reach accredited investors, in order to do public offerings. So I think this is major. Because whenever I go to other jurisdictions like Singapore, before Washington, talking a lot with global investors, like it's a reality happening in Brazil. Like it's not going to happen like 3 years from now. It's happening now. So I think this is pretty like amazing. And the regulators, they are embracing this new technology. Also, I think like the regulators, like in US, for example, they are trying to onshore capital and also onshore like intellectual capital on the blockchain industry. I think the US was like 10 years behind in the dispute, and they are trying to fast forward in order to embrace like capital and onshore capital. Also, I think UK is trying to do that. I don't think that's what the central bank and the SEC and the CVM are trying to do in Brazil. They are trying to increase the quality of the playing field here. They understand that Brazil is one of the biggest commodity producers in the world, and our capital market needs to be globally connected to other jurisdictions. And I think there is a huge implications on how the technology is going to be first adopted here in order also to reach other jurisdictions. On the business side, as you said, we already reached $2 billion, roughly $400 million in assets under management. So this is small, but it's not that small anymore. And we think that we are scaling like super well with an amazing track record for our investors. We can see the benefits on how this technology can bring more control, security, and transparency for credit operations. But I think what I like the most to tell about on the business traction that we are having here is that 80% of the capital that is allocated in our platform comes from institutionals. So whenever we discuss about crypto and how it's going to be adopted, the mass adoption will come whenever institutions like they adopt it. I think in Brazil, we have this really amazing effect that institutionals, they know, and I'm talking about big banks, I'm talking about family offices, the biggest family offices in the country, like the asset managers here. They understand that, okay, we need to invest in technology to have more control, more transparent, automate stuff, automating the back office of capital market. So there are very few companies developing like important technology in Brazil. So they are embracing that. And once they see the results, it's like, why? Why should I structure a credit fund that takes like 6 months, that is like very expensive, full of intermediaries. It's very opaque vehicle. Why I'm not using like a better technology to access credit and like having better yields? So in Brazil, we see like the biggest banks, and I cannot disclosure, but it's amazing to see like the balance sheet of the biggest banks. They are allocating in managers that are buying assets in our platform, and it's beautiful to see how we bring value to investors, to originators, and to us, like to the platform that we are developing. So it's really like impressive how capital market is evolving in Brazil, and I'm super bullish on what's going to be around in the next decade.
That's great. Thank you for that explanation. And going back to maybe the kind of the we'll go back to the basics here a little bit and just talk about the kind of the three folks involved, the three kind of sets of stakeholders involved in this. You have like your originators, you have like you guys for the platform, and then the issuance platform. Then you have the investors, and maybe talk about like each of those groups respectively, and like where is the value being generated here? Like why is what you guys are doing like fundamentally a better way of doing this than like maybe the previous version of the system. Maybe just kind of go through each of those stakeholders and talk about like what value are they getting out of this.
On the originator side, Aaron, like the biggest value proposition that we add to them is that we reduce costs. Like since we are replacing intermediaries through technology, we can have a more efficient solution for them. So it's faster. It's like easier to conciliate. They have access to like a better infrastructure. But in the end of the day, they are reducing costs. Roughly, it's 38.5% cheaper for them to structure and operate a credit operation with us than to use like a credit fund. There is also 38.5%, almost 40% cheaper. Yes, the report that we will. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the report that we launched with some of the biggest global players in this industry. But that's the case that we are showing to the world. And in Brazil, for example, like for you as an originator to structure a credit fund, it's only worth if there is like a minimum size of $4 or $5 million. So I need to have like $5 or $4 million in receivable. We are a country that we have 63 million companies in Brazil, and I would say like only 5 or 4 thousand companies have this type of demand in order to structure and access credit capital market in Brazil. Come on, man! Like it's a huge gap that technology needs to play a role. So in the US, that's a way bigger like capital market that we have here in Brazil, like private credit market, there is more efficient involved. So I think when we reduce like this type of friction in order for originators to access capital market, we are bringing like lots of value for them. There is a second huge value proposition that we add for them is that we decentralize the source of capital that normally invests on them. So in Brazil, I would say like 8 or 10 players normally, like the big banks, they provide a fund for credit operations in our market. You access retail investors, when you access family offices straight, when you go for the global product that we just launched 2 weeks ago, you are diversifying the source of capital, and that brings more competition, that reduces the cost, that brings more innovation. So I think this is super important also for our originators, so they can access different source of capital. So you can invest with $200 in one credit opportunity in Brazil, and if you want to buy a FIDIC, like a credit fund, you need to have at least like $1 million in order to access this type of products in the country. So for originators, I think the value proposition it's super like clear since day one. For the investors, depends on the type of investor. For institutional investors in Brazil, normally they have access to this type of opportunity, but they see with us a lot more control on the operations. So normally when they invest in a credit fund, they buy like a senior tranche of the credit fund, They don't know what's inside the credit fund. It's a very opaque vehicle. So they receive a report in the end of the month saying that, okay, your position is that. And that's pretty much it. So with the problems that we are having in Brazilian like financial industry on terms of getting more technology involved, we had some hacks, we had some problems of the misusage of the financial sector, some parts of the financial sectors here in the country. I think the right and the serious investors in this space, there is this urgent need for them to have more control in their operations. They need to understand what's behind. They need to automate rules saying like, okay, if you have some delinquency rate that's higher than X%, then execute. And what's the best technology to solve this type of problems is the blockchain. You know better than me that we have like a transparent, like a database that is immutable. You can automate rules on the smart contracts, and then you can have a more transparent and easier to integrate, easy to audit, 24/7 operation. So for institutional investors, they see like the benefits, like in a completely unimaginable angle. When we started the company, that institutions, they would see so much value proposition on what we are building here. And also the back office of the capital market is completely like I cannot say bad words here. So it's completely, it's not sophisticated. The conciliation is manual. It's full of spreadsheets and PDFs running through emails. So you need to have a better client field in order to scale this industry. So that's for the value proposition for institutional investors. But then we have, for example, for retail investors, you can have more access because the token, you can have the fractional ownership of the investment, then you can have like a smaller amount of money for you to test. Then you can have a secondary on top of that. You can create more volatility. So it's a better like value proposition for retail investors. And then you have this beautiful and amazing value proposition for global investors. Because now, if they want to invest in a credit fund in Brazilian capital market, they need to bring their assets to Brazil. They need to structure a credit vehicle. They need to take like 1 year almost to enter the market. They need like 3 years to leave the market. It's not transparent, full of intermediaries. And now, with the USDC on their treasury, they can get access to this type of profitability that we have here in AmFi with a very smooth, transparent, easy way for them to enter the market. And the first global product that we developed, it yields 12%. It's dollar denominated product that has a 15-day redemption period. So if you want to leave the country, you just press eject, 15 days, you're out. So for global investors, this type of, okay, maybe Brazil, it's a nice opportunity. It's far, it's complex, it's not so easy to understand. But now with $200, I can try it. And also you can try it. And then you say like, okay, I can bring my institutionals behind now that I, as an executive, try it. Then there is this huge opportunity to be explored. So I think for investors, the value proposition that the promises that the blockchain delivers with us, it's clear the value proposition that we are adding to investors.
I mean, this is super interesting because the rates that you're talking about here, I mean, you're talking 11, 12% for this product. I've seen some of your other products that looks like they're more like locally oriented products, but, yielding excess of like 18, 19, 20%. I mean, these are like just for context. I mean, Terra Luna, the DeFi thing that collapsed a couple of years ago and like took out the whole industry, like that was paying 20% yield, right? Like that was so like, not to compare your project to Terra Luna, but I'm just saying like by like crypto standards, like this is like pretty good yield by anybody's standards, right? Whether it's crypto or otherwise, and especially like if you're coming from the US or like, some of these Western markets to get, I mean, if you're getting like 3% on a product, that's pretty good, right? But like 10 or 12 or even 20, like that's almost unheard of for, obviously there's risk, but it's like very, these aren't products that like a US investor could like normally have access to, right? Or these types of yields. So yeah, I guess I would love your thoughts on that. Like what's been like the reception of you as you've been maybe, I know you've been kind of doing like a road show, et cetera, both in Brazil and outside of Brazil. But like, what's been the reception as folks are learning about this, that this is even a possibility to access? Like, you can access these products now without being a huge institution, without having to go through some complicated brokerage, some complicated arrangement, whatever. What's been the response from people? Is this, are people like, is this too good to be true, or like, what's the reaction?
Amazing. It's very similar to what you just described, with the exception that you are living in Brazil for the past like few years, so you understand way better how it's possible. So for them, it's like, Paulo, I don't know how it's possible. Seems like a huge scam that you guys are trying to create here in order to access our funds. And then I need to explain first how Brazil works, and it's a very difficult task to explain how Brazil works. That's why we developed this really nice and deep and well structured report on the basics of our economy. So first, we have one of the highest interest rates in the world. Nowadays, the basic interest rate in Brazil is like around 15%. And then on top of that, we have spread. So that's why we have like this 21.2% as the average return for our current investors in the platform. So there's no secret. It's the interest rate plus the premium for the credit risk here, for the private credit risk. Secondly, I need to explain to them that it's a fully collateral product that we're developing here. And then I need to explain how the receivable industry works in Brazil. Since I was a kid, I never heard of any of my family, of any of my friends buy like any good, like any television, like any like freezer or something like that upfront. We always buy it with buy now pay later. So it's a reality in our country for the last, I don't know, 30 years after we got the Plano Real being deployed by the Brazilian government. So everybody in here pays with receivables, pays in installments. Even a company pays with installments to other company. So we have this huge receivable market opportunity in Brazil with credit card receivable. It's like $800 billion like market size. And then invoices, we have $2.5 trillion like market size. Then I need to explain to them why this receivable market is evolving, because there is this agenda of the central bank, this BC hashtag agenda. There is modernizing and digitalizing our economy. It started with the B2C, with like many things like Pix, and now it's moving for the B2B industry. So the assets now in Brazil, they need to be registered in an entity that is centralized. I was the founder of one of those entities. So there are just five allowed to do this type of stuff that brings more transparent to the market. And then I need to explain to them our platform now that we have like this huge immense market that's becoming digital. Then you have the blockchain technology that we are developing on our end. And this technology is fully integrated with the whole infrastructure in Brazilian capital market. And then I need to explain to them, okay, now there is this change that are happening in the country. So blockchain is being adopted. The central bank is creating more incentives for global investors to get in. And they always, after all this whole explanation, like a few more minutes than I had here, Aaron, it's like, I like it, but it's still complex. It's still far. There are too many risks involved. And then I say, like, always, like, just test it with the solutions that we are building here. Like, I can explain to you, I can give you the report, I can tell you many, 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 many things. But once you test it with $200, you see where your money is arriving, how the assets are behind, and how it's fully like registered in the real world. And then you have the blockchain like bringing more security on top of the solution. Then you can understand. And once you understand, then you can make like your position and your bets and your investment like decisions. So that's a little bit what we are create here, Aaron. And I think we have this huge, huge, huge um, responsibility to not only build that in the proper and the correct way, but also the responsibility to deliver and to not promise many things, but to deliver like the best standards, the best compliance, the best technology, the best like product. And then I think it maybe take time, maybe they will like start slower, But once they do, like there is no turning back because Brazil has an amazing opportunity on the capital market of our country. And I think we are developing, like it will evolve and it will be globally connected. That's the pitch, okay, Aaron? But just to finish, there was also something that I'm discovering traveling around the world, and we decided to launch first in Southeast Asia. We started in Singapore, and then next year we are moving to Middle East, and maybe once we get even bigger, US and UK seems like the end game of the go-to-market that we are aiming here. On the other hand, what I discovered is that, okay, imagine that you are born in Singapore. 60% of the country work with financial services. They are very well educated in many sophisticated financial services and financial products. They are investing in the blockchain space since they are like 15, 18 years old because they are like testing, and then they can combine those two things as non-country in the world. So they can see how the blockchain, the DeFi space can add tremendous value for the financial, like traditional world, but they don't have yield there. They don't have commodities there. So if you are buying your second home in Singapore, you're paying like 60% just in tax. So that there is nothing there to be tokenized. If there is nothing there to be tokenized, they cannot create financial products. They cannot spread. They cannot create derivatives. They cannot create like more sophisticated products on top of what we are building here. So they need us. They need Brazil to bring RWA products on chain in scale with standardized process, with security, with control, with like the best like technology involved. And once the yield is there, then they can create like many financial products on top of that. So I think there is this symbiosis and they need to test it. So my whole here, it should be like exceptional to build the best technology, to build the best products for the global community. And I only ask for them, like, just test us, like, just see the technology running, just see the products behind it. And once you test it, okay, maybe there is this amazing, immense opportunity that we are going to create together.
No, I love that. Yeah, and I think some of the the resistance that you first met in 2022 when you were going around to the different regulators institutions, people are like, "What is this blockchain thing? Who are you? What are you talking about? This sounds like a scam, etc." Like you're gonna still. I mean, it's a matter of time before like all these barriers kind of get broken down, right? I think there's different levels of these types of products, right? Like people might be really familiar with Bitcoin, they might be really excited about Bitcoin, but this other kind of tokenized debt products from someplace in South America, okay, maybe that's a little too far up the risk curve for me, right? But I think it's only it's just a matter of education. It's a matter of time before people start understanding in more depth, like just what these types of products actually are and what types of like new things that are enabled. Because at the end of the day, these are like very like new types of products for a lot of these people, right? It's not just like, ooh, I can buy a tokenized money market fund. Like I could buy a regular money market fund or I could buy a tokenized one. It's like basically the same thing. I already know what it is, right? But this is sort of a fundamentally new type of product to a lot of these folks. I'd be curious to understand like what's been maybe the uptake or even the amount of time you've spent maybe doing marketing to more of like the crypto native crowd to be buying these assets, because it kind of strikes me that I mean, crypto people are always on the hunt for yield, right? Of whatever sort, and the yields that you guys are offering are quite competitive. And I think people who have been in crypto and the DeFi world long enough have learned that if you put your money into something and you don't know where the yield is coming from, like you are probably in fact the yield for somebody else, right? And it's like it's kind of like a meme at this point, like you are the yield, and in this case it's like, wow, like these are products that there's actually like real yield attached to them, right? So I'd be curious to know just like what's maybe been the uptake on that, or what's been maybe the level of interest from more maybe crypto native folks, whether they be institutions or funds or retail folks who are like, hey, like this is 10%, like 12%, sign me up.
In the beginning, Aaron, I would say 100% of our focus were on the crypto native like investors, because we had this impression that since they are familiar with the benefits of the blockchain, since they are using like all the DeFi like tools, it would be easier for them to understand the value proposition of RWAs. but it wasn't the case. And I think like uh, the crypto investors that made more amounts of money, I think they can understand better the benefits of having like perpetuals, like circles of yields being invested time over time. But at least in Brazil, when the crypto investor are like they are starting to create their portfolio, or they are like, let's say, less than $200,000 in returns, normally they are trying to get multiples, like they are trying to get yield alphas, and they are trying to get like betting like in not casino, but they're trying to all in and get like 2 3 times on that portfolio. And then I understand the reason, like they need to create like the true value on their investment. But once they get like $1 million or $200,000, like okay, 12, 15%, 20% year after year, like come on, you don't need to work anymore, because like the yield that you are getting from this type of investment, it's higher than the yield that you would get like working. So I think it really depends on the amount of the money that the investor, the share of wallet, and the thesis of the investor in order to allocate here. But on the other hand, for the global product, we see that institutional like distributors, they are going to be the channel that we are going to use, because like we don't want, and we don't have the resources, the knowledge, like the strength to reach retail investors all over the world. So I think like the some exchanges, some even like decentralized exchanges, they are creating their like distribution channels, their pipelines to reach investors. So there is like this opportunity that they are going to explore with the real world assets that we are bringing here. Uh, but let's see. I think the market is evolving a lot. It's super exciting on how things are changing. So I think like in 10 years from now, people won't discuss if it's a RWA or if it's a traditional investment. Like everything's going to be tokenized. So everything's going to be easier to be accessed. So I think these are the this will evolve a lot in the next like a couple of years. And we see like different types of people like giving different types of value proposition, as I just said. So it's like I get like every time super like interested on understanding why people are using our platform, and it's very common to have different answers, you know. So I think this will evolve a lot over the next years.
I'd be curious to get some more color from your recent trip to Washington D.C., where you're at the D.C. FinTech Week, and you're talking about the project, and you mentioned that some of the folks were kind of surprised, like wow, like we're all talking about this in hypotheticals, and you guys are actually doing this thing. Um, Maybe talk a bit more about like what was. I mean, did you see any kind of like light bulbs going off in people's brains as you were like kind of explaining this to them, and like this is what you can actually do with this technology. This is what the actual unlock is.
Yes, I was in a panel with the global head of digital assets from Visa, PayPal, and the head of the Hong Kong government for the Hong Kong government, like central bank. And we are discussing on how emerging countries and how developed countries are going to be connected through the blockchain. And when I was explaining to the audience, it was more than 300 people watching this specific panel that we were there. Several presidents and governors of several central banks, lots of executives from like big corporations. They were after the event, they were discussing a lot with me on okay, how Brazil can also like export this technology that we are developing here in order to have more efficient, frictionless like capital market in other jurisdictions. So I think this was like the biggest like takeaway that I got from the event. And also there was Paul Atkins from the president of the SEC, that he was also presenting in in the day before me, and he was telling about like okay, it always starts as very eccentric, very specific people using it. So in like electricity, in 1890, I think it was only like in New York for very rich eccentric guys. And then 40 years later, 50 years later, like half of the US house who had electricity there. So it's something that you cannot fight back. It's something that you cannot argue. It's going to happen. So I think like Brazil, it's going to be the first large country to be fully tokenized. Everybody is super curious about what we are doing here. Pix is like an amazing thing. Everybody's asking how we got there. And I think like what we are doing in RWA and blockchain and capital market, it's the same, like people are going to be impressed like that.
One of the common kind of themes I've heard as I've been talking to different kind of RWA issuers, originators in Brazil is that you're kind of having this. It's a good problem to have in the sense that there's more, I guess, supply of these assets, these tokenized receivables, tokenized private credit, than there is demand to like invest in them, to buy them, right? I think part of that's just due to the fact that perhaps like you're bringing on maybe like smaller and medium sized businesses that like wouldn't have been, there's no interest in this stuff or beforehand, right before in the kind of pre blockchain age. And this is the importance of kind of opening up and trying to bring in like new investment from overseas, whether it be from Singapore or Middle East or US or wherever. I guess like, first part of the question would be like, have you found that to be the case as well, in your experience here? And then B, if we are able to bring this like influx of just foreign, investment into like these Brazilian private credit markets, and we have more liquidity, we have more efficiency in these markets, like, how does that ultimately impact the economy of Brazil, right? How does that ultimately affect like, the small and medium sized business, like the store or the, the shipping company or like whatever, or the, whatever the company might be, like, how does that ultimately like improve maybe the day-to-day lives of people and businesses here in Brazil?
Great. The second question that I was asked in the central the panel was how this, like everything that we are doing here, how it impacts like the small and medium business in the country. And I think that with more capital, better capital, with like more efficient in operations, we can increase competition in the country. We can lower down the interest rates. We can reduce the spreads here in the country. So the benefit, it's going to be all over the economy that we have in Brazil. Also, in the US, I think credit market, private credit market, it's just to make it simple. Like our economy, it's 13 times smaller than the American economy, but our capital market, like our private capital market, it's 56 times smaller. So what does it mean? Like almost 80% of the funds that reach like our economy, they go through the banking system. In US, it's almost the opposite way. Like the capital market, the private credit market, it's bigger than the banking industry for small and medium business in US. And I think that's a trend that's going to happen in Brazil. So there is this push to have more investors from different backgrounds investing in private credit market in Brazil. And I think this is very good for the economy as long as we deliver. Like we cannot have like a product on the market that is going to be like predatory or that's going to be like bad for the like fraud and etc. This is not good in any way. So as long as we get rid of that, more players in the industry means more competitiveness, more like better spreads and better interest rates. So I think this is what is going to happen.
Maybe just to wrap up here, I mean, what you're talking about, and I think this whole tokenization movement really, this is all starting to make a bit more sense now. Why the central bank was like really bullish on promoting like the Drex project and their stated objective for the Drex project, at least in sort of the last edition of it, was like really trying to improve access to credit, right? Reducing the costs and improving access, right? via kind of tokenized credit markets and things like this. And now Drex is kind of it's in a taking a different direction, I guess, for the time being anyway. But it's exciting to see that the private sector and like folks like you and the other tokenizers in the space are continuing to like really find product market fit with these products, right? It's like there's it doesn't seem to appear to be any shortage of assets to be tokenizing, of these receivables and things to be tokenizing. And now the push is just trying to find investors who are willing to invest in these kind of more exotic products, right? But maybe to kind of wrap up here, I would love any kind of final thoughts from your end, but I would love just kind of what's your big picture on like where do you see like all this going, and where do you see kind of AmFi really playing a part of this? I mean, is this are you when we talk about like expanding to other countries, are we talking about just offering these products in other countries? Or are you like, hey, maybe we can take this infrastructure we've built in Brazil and we can apply this to private credit in Argentina, or we can apply it to private credit in South Africa, or but maybe talk a bit about like what are your expansion plans and how do you see all this progressing?
Okay, that's a beautiful question, Aaron. And I think like first we need to consolidate our presence in Brazil, and I think by next couple next years, I think we are going to be super focused on Brazil and how we can expand here with the right technology, the right partnerships, like the right quality. And I think this is where we are focusing like a lot in terms of origination. I honestly don't see us going for other jurisdictions in the short term in terms of origination, because I think Brazil is massive. There is this huge opportunity here. Like the tailwinds are there, and we need to take advantage of being a local player that understands like super well our market in order to grow. On terms of the distribution outside Brazil, and I really think Southeast Asia and Middle East, they have the perfect like combination of factors that are aligned with Brazil. So they are like very developed in terms of digital asset adoptions. They are looking for global presence in emerging countries, and they need these assets like this yield in order to evolve the ecosystems that they are developing there. So I think that's enough for let's say 1 or 2 years, and that's where we should focus first. If we get like stronger, bigger, like with more like use cases and getting like more connected with the global ecosystem, then definitely UK and US are part of the global expansion. But that's a problem for Paulo for let's say 18 months from now. I think that's where that's where I should focus on that.
Amazing. Well, Paulo, really appreciate your time today. This has been a great conversation. Really excited to get you on the show here and just hear about the AmFi story and just the successes you've been having and just learning about more about you as an individual as well. I would love to maybe just turn the floor back to you for any final thoughts. And how can folks find you, get in touch with you, or learn more if they're interested?
Oh, amazing! I think LinkedIn works super well. Also Telegram. I'm following you in your Telegram chat, so just look for me there, and I'll be there. But also we just deployed. We just deployed in the market one really nice report on how credit markets going to be an immense opportunity in Brazil. So everyone can find it, and I think this is a very nice reading for anyone willing to understand more our credit market in Brazil. And secondly, we just launched the global product that we developed, so you can go and find global and then you can try the products, because in the end of the day, I think this is my best and my biggest message. Like I cannot explain to anyone in the early 90s, in the 1900s, how to use an automobile and how is the feeling of riding a car. Just go test the vehicle, you are going to feel the wind and it's going to change your mind. So that's a little bit of my advice. Test it, $200, see how it works. withdraw, see how everything developed, and then you can make your own investment decisions.
I'll say I've tried it. It's a very smooth experience, very easy, very nicely done. UX is really nice. So yeah, it's open to foreigners, so you can be a gringo and give it a shot. But yeah, Paulo, appreciate your time. Best of luck to you over the rest of the year and in the year to come. And looking forward to doing this again sometime soon for an update.
Okay, it's my pleasure, Aaron, and talk to you soon. Bye bye, guys.
Thanks, Paulo. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next time.